Good night. Hello. We're going to begin right now our last session of the day. I have the pleasure to present our speakers. First of all, let me say that this is the Food Security Conference in the Mediterranean. As we were talking before about energy, we also have this crisis of food security. Unfortunately, it was first the disruption of the supply of food through COVID-19, and then we had this Russia-Ukraine war, and we had these two events that affected the food security, I would say, in many countries. We had tonight the possibility of talking with experts of the sector. We have with us several experts. We had first Tarek El-Sherbini from the European Reconstructive Development Bank. Hello, I know that you are from London connected. Hello. Then we have with me two presidential speakers. We have Sarah Shur. Hello. And then we have Ali Bensouda. Hello. I will present every one of you at the moment. First of all, I will give the word to Mr. Tarek El-Sherbini. He's the regional head of food officer of agribusiness responsible in the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development in London. So good night. I know that you were connected and waiting for us. So just to give some rules and to be clear, you will have 5, 6, 7 minutes each one to make your presentation, okay? I know that we are late and it's very late at night, but anyway, just go on and we will wait for you, okay? So the floor is yours, Mr. Tarek El-Sherbini. Go on.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. So as you mentioned, I'm responsible for food and agribusiness investments and financing and advisory activities overall in North Africa and the East Mediterranean countries. So the countries that have been discussed at length in the previous session. Our focus is on Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, North Africa, in addition to Jordan, Lebanon, and the West Bank and Gaza in the East Mediterranean within that region. The activities of EBRD, for those who are not familiar, are focused on finding financing and investment opportunities to support the operations and activities of businesses, in this case, in the food and agribusiness value chain, with a focus on the private sector businesses, large and small companies, whether foreign owned or local owned. And we have been operating in that region for the past 10 years, almost exactly. We started in 2012. And those countries, overall, EBRD has been in existence for the past 31 years, operating in a wider region that includes Central and Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and overall the former Soviet Union. So again, I mean, countries and a region that has been in discussion in the previous sessions, and I'm sure we'll discuss more about both regions, Eastern Europe and North Africa and the Mediterranean in the throughout this panel.
Thank you, Mr. Tarek El-Sherbini. We'll make later a question, okay, and we will open the debate with the rest of the speakers. I'm just going to give the word to Sarah Shur. Sarah Shur is trade analyst at the Ministry of Trade and Industry in Egypt, and also she's a researcher in the German center, SAGE. So welcome, and just the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So I think that everyone is tired by now, but I hope we make the presentation good for you. We've talked today so much about how we need a new model of governance that is innovative and adaptive, and that is something very, very relevant to the food security problem in the region. Let us say it's a challenge, and let us say that we've performed better than we actually have expected. The numbers says that there's a lot of countries that actually jumped to through the food security index, such as Jordan, despite the fact that this was not expected. The area has a lot of countries that actually export a lot of imported agricultural products, but also imports a lot of cereals, grains, which is very critical to the food security issue today, and probably we'll dig deeper more during our discussions in that.
Thank you. I'm sure that we will have an opportunity to discuss more later once we'll make the questions. So I'm going to present our last speaker, well, the third speaker, which is Ali Ben Souda.
Thank you.
Ali, he's managing partner in Go Consulting Maroc. So good morning. You're going to speak in French?
Yes,
Alors,
it's
bonsoir.
better. Merci beaucoup, Luis. Effectivement, aujourd'hui,
So today, food sovereignty is no longer a myth, it's a reality. We've seen this recently with Ukraine, with the crisis. The prices have increased more than 400%. It's an observation. We need to move to action, and we're going to speak about that next on the panel.
Thank you. Thank you for this short intervention. We'll have the opportunity of discussing, okay? I just took some questions for you. I'm just Pedroda. I'm going to begin with Tarek, who was the one who spoke before. What do you think are the challenges right now that we have to surmount this agri-food crisis? And I also would like to ask you about the activities, the programs that you are implementing from the EBRD to support those countries that have been more affected by the agri-food crisis. Just take the floor.
Thank you very much. Lots of challenges. I mean, I heard discussed in the previous session on both sides of the value chain, the upstream and downstream sides. So maybe I'll be repeating some of the points, but obviously we have had already logistics challenges and supply chain challenges that have started during the COVID lockdown periods in 2020 and 2021, and these created supply chain shortages all around the globe in different segments and different sectors, including the food-related sectors, and including in this particular region, the Mediterranean region, whether inbound or outbound trade. These challenges, of course, were exaggerated and enhanced by the war that started earlier in this year, creating supply deficiency, big supply choking and deficiency in especially grains and edible oil coming out of Ukraine and of Russia. Then on the other side of the downstream, that created difficulties and big challenges for the recipient countries. The ones in particular we're talking about are North Africa, East Mediterranean countries, which were very reliant on imports of grains and of edible oils from Ukraine and from Russia. These issues happened in parallel. I mean, there was a perfect storm this year for North African and East Mediterranean countries. The perfect storm included the increasing interest rates globally, inflation that was associated by very fast increase in interest rates in developed countries, and that led, in addition to the risks that increased with the Ukraine war, increasing interest rates led to a very fast wave of shift of international capital, especially short-term capital from the North African, East Mediterranean countries and from emerging markets overall. But I mean, the countries we focused on are North Africa, East Mediterranean countries. There was a big shift of capital outside of those countries. Egypt had a big impact. It was impacted a lot because of that. And then the capital has been shifting, and I think it's continuing to shift towards more developed markets because of the interest rate changes. So there still is a lot of big challenges, difficulties in both accessibility of grains and edible oils, and also in terms of having the liquidity, the funding to purchase edible oil and grains and overall other items. I mean, there has been, of course, been like a peak and then a drop in the grain and edible oil prices throughout this year. It's been very volatile. So we're well below the peak in prices that we saw a few months ago, which helps to alleviate a bit of pressure. But the major pressure is still there. There is very little foreign currency liquidity available at the moment in the importing countries in North Mediterranean, in the South Mediterranean, East Mediterranean, and the volatility still exists. I mean, we see the agreements on the grain corridor from Ukraine keeps switching on and off. It's very difficult to have any visibility on where the prices and where the supplies or the volumes will be in the next few months. So lots of challenges still to manage in the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you, Tarek, for the answer to the first question. I'm going to give the word to Sarah. I will ask her, how can trade policies, in your opinion, build agricultural resilience in this time of crisis? What's your opinion about this?
I'll build upon what Tarek have just said. I think we're in front of a crossroad now, and probably trade can be an enabler, but also can be a disabler. What we've seen that the Secretary General of WTO just came out and said, please let the restrictive trade measures down. And this is something that we'll always keep pleading for a lot of countries, but also trade can be very helpful in some instances. Let me recall some cases. For example, enabling the trade facilitation agreement implementation in many countries have actually made conditions better, not only for cereals, but other for other goods, essential goods during the COVID and now. And that has been actually proven that it could help and decrease the cost of perishable goods 18%. There's a lot of belief in digitalization in the MENA region, how it could actually decrease the costs for exchanging agricultural products. Many countries in the region have put a lot of investment in this regard. In the single windows, we've talked in the past session of the blockchain and how could it actually affect the flow of goods in a very eminent and very quick way. I would reach to another point, which is the need for innovation on a regional level. And I cite here one of the very nice experiences in the region is Jordan. There had been an initiative that been declared by Jordan, which is the Jordan Regional Food Facility, or what they call Food Observatory. And that is a notion that's beginning to rise globally now with the food crisis. There's a lot of speculations about how it would be implemented. There's a lot of questions. Yes, in the beginning, it's a little bit challenging, but there's a lot of prospects for it in the future. One other thing that really helps Egypt as well is the importance of diversifying your trade partners and trade agreements in this regard. We've always relied on Russia and Ukraine for our supply for cereals, but one thing that we've been looking forward to during the last couple of months is the Mercosur countries, Brazil. They have been an alternative partner that had helped a lot in answering to the demand of our population. That is something very important. One very important, maybe last thing that I want to add is the importance of innovation and putting investment in the R&D, in the agriculture in the region. We do not only face geopolitical crises, and we've seen a health crisis. This means that we would not be facing the last crisis. I'm not being pessimistic, but a little bit of being prepared for upcoming crisis. I think it's very important to put this money and investment in the agricultural sector, and a very important example in this regard, at least in a lot of southern Mediterranean countries, is a crop like the quinoa. Which has been an alternative for a lot of other cereals that is being produced. Of course, it needs a lot of cultural change to make the population want to replace, a very popular grain product with another new product, but that's something to look into in the future, changing cultures towards some crops.
Thank you, Sarah, for your answer. I think it's very interesting what you said about digitalization. I agree with you about the role of digital tools and the impact that it can have in trade, and especially to solve the food crisis. No? And I also like your example about the facility that he implemented in Jordan. And I made a second question to Tarek before about facilities, programs, measures, something that maybe from the EBRD they could implement. I will right now give the word to Ali to make the round, but then I would like that Tarek could explain or say something else about any facility, measure, or program that you implemented from the EBRD, okay? So there's one question for Ali. Okay, Ali. The point is, what are solutions and opportunities do you think that the agri-food crisis is opening, for the private sector in the Mediterranean region? Because we've been talking about facility, about trade, about digitalization, but I also would like to hear from you, from an expert. What do you think about the opportunities that there are in a crisis? There's always opportunities, especially for the private sector in the Med region. Thank you.
Alors, effectivement.
So indeed, each crisis has pros and cons. We all know the negative side, inflation and the demand supply that's out of balance. But there's opportunities to innovate, to digitize, and to apply new principles, different modes of consumption, reducing waste, but also developing short economies, adapting the environment, so adapting to short circuit economies. We don't have to go international when we can do things locally. And then transfer of knowledge management. We have expertise. We're among the oldest countries with developed civilizations. So we should create in the Mediterranean region opportunities. So using data, which are the information and data that we share. And then secondly, based on knowledge management, so transfer of knowledge, but also technological transfer. We can use donors, European funds who can help us to create these platform exchanges. Agriculture is, well, congratulations. Yesterday we become 8 billion people. The population increases. We're seeing organic demand that is increasing for food. So because of this demand, every industrial person, every sector needs to develop. And we see several projects that are financed in agribusiness. We've organized forums with the FAO, the World Bank, everything around agriculture, and agribusiness, which is new business around agriculture, how to make agriculture accessible. We have several challenges that we need to face up to. The Mediterranean region is one of the poorest regions, the least industrialized when it comes to agriculture, and suffers climate change. We know the Mediterranean region is increasing 20% in the climate change versus other regions. So the difficulties are there, but the opportunities are also there. Funding is also there. Institutions are there. We need to create this famous exchange platform. Experts are here today to ensure this knowledge and technical management transfer to ensure that the Mediterranean becomes the agricultural base for the countries.
Thank you, Ali. I think right now is the turn of Tarek. We hear him to explain challenges. Right now we want to hear about money. Okay, maybe they want to finance this platform. I don't know it, but I'm sure that maybe Tarek can explain some facilities, programs, or measures that they implemented during this last year to support those countries that really suffered the agri-food crisis, just in terms of security for food. Okay, just the floor is yours, Tarek.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks a lot. So as soon as the war broke out at the end of February, we started thinking actively how we can support the countries we operate in on the downstream side, on the importing side. So we have starting March have had discussions with our counterparts in North Africa and the East Mediterranean, both on the governmental side and also on the private sector side. And we had a lot of discussions, of course, on the back of that within EBRD with our shareholders, and to try to act quickly to support countries that are impacted, on both sides of the value chain. But I'll focus to start with on the countries on the importing side. The result of that is that we have worked as a start with Tunisia, with the Tunisian government and the Tunisian authorities on formulating financing to support the imports of grains into Tunisia. And we have done that in very close cooperation with the other development banks and international organizations working in Tunisia. So we have been working in a sort of very cooperative and coordinating manner with other stakeholders to make sure that we have coordinated and effective efforts. The outcome of that, from our perspective and from our side, is that we have provided recently, in the past few weeks, we have concluded a facility of 150 million euros that we have provided to Office de Cereal, the Tunisian-owned, the Tunisian government-owned enterprise that is responsible for the procurement and storage and sale and distribution of wheat and barley and grains into Tunisia. So we provided that facility to help, as I mentioned earlier, bridge the gap in terms of funding needs and to provide, to make sure that there is no shortage at all of the provision and supply of these essential grain commodities. In association with that, we have also agreed, and we're working with the ODC, with Office de Cereal, and with relevant Tunisian authorities to help formulate and structure a long-term, I would say, structural solution to help increase efficiencies and competitiveness related to grain value chain. So I mean, the money, the funding can only go so far. It has an immediate impact, which is very important in this case because there was an urgent need. There still is for having a flow of funding to make sure that grain and essential food supplies are not interrupted. But I think what helps, what's more sustainable for long-term smooth supplies and for long-term sustainable efficient supply chains and value chains of grains and foods overall is to increase efficiencies, improve competitiveness, involve the private sector more in the value chain in an efficient manner to avoid, again, putting a lot of burden on governments so that they have to source and fund food supplies all the time. The private sector can do it, and they do it in most countries in the world in as effective way. So I mean, we're working in addition to the immediate funding requirement on a longer term structure solution to improve the efficiency of those value chains in Tunisia. We've had similar discussions with other countries we're working with in the region, and we're continuing these discussions. These are sort of ongoing efforts and discussions, both on the funding side and on the advisory and policy sides. On the upstream side, just sort of to close the chain, we have been also providing both funding and advisory support to the Ukrainian agriculture exporters, so to make sure that the exports that are going partially to the South and East Mediterranean countries continue flowing as to the extent possible within sort of our capabilities. So we have created an overall package of 200 million euros for the Ukrainian agriculture sector, and these are provided through different parameters, partially through our trade facilitation program, partially through guarantees to local financial institutions, and some of that through direct loans to Ukrainian agribusiness companies, again, to help them in this particularly difficult period and make sure that the supplies going out of Ukraine continue to be heading to the importing countries to the extent possible within the circumstances. So these are the sort of some of the efforts, Luis, so that we've been trying to do at the EBRD on different parts of the supply chain, both on the funding side and on the advisory and policy sides.
Thank you very much, Tarek. I think that we heard many ideas here. We heard challenges, facilities, measures implemented. We also heard about digitalization, about platforms. So I don't know if any of you want to add something before closing. Go on, Ali.
Le thème de la conférence le dit clairement, il est temps d'agir.
It's time to act. I think a crisis, by definition, is determined by time. The problem that we have with food right now is because it's a human right and we should all have access. If the entire global population does not have access, we must act. And if we do not act tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, well, the funding is there. We must remove the barriers. We must have a shared vision across the region. And above all, it's all about time. We don't have time. We must act now. We need to take advantage of the opportunities that exist today. Two figures. 30% of current wheat comes from Ukraine and Russia. There's opportunities. If we, without speaking about other sectors and other opportunities, without speaking about organic growth, so I would invite all agents, public, private, institutional, to sit around the same table and to tackle the subject. We don't want to manage crises and give loans to relieve situations. We should act, and in the future we need to act earlier. I know this is the last session today. There's lots of opportunities, but if we have one opportunity today, it's that of agriculture, which is the future.
Maybe I want to re-stress that sufficiency, self-sufficiency is not needed and is not possible at this moment. It's very important to be able to try to find new solutions, as we did with medical goods after the COVID crisis. I really think that on a regional level, there's a lot to be done on how we can actually cooperate in making this work. Ukraine and Russia, we never know this crisis would be sorted when. So, answering to a human need, we have to find some regional solution to that on some basis. So, as Ali said, the time is now.
Et je me permets juste de rebondir.
If I can just come back to that, I know a lot of startups, lots of companies that would like to have the opportunity. We need to give young people the opportunity to succeed. They have ideas, they have initiatives. There's digital credit companies to support startups. We just need to give them the sandbox to test and develop their ideas.
Maybe Tarek, do you want to say something else before closing? Do you have something else to say?
No, I mean, I second what Sarah said. I mean, the self-sufficiency is not a question. It's not a possibility in many countries, and it's not, I think, needed to think of. I think efficiency of supply chains. I mean, in North Africa and the East Mediterranean, involving the private sector more can help reduce the burden on governments in terms of funding and in terms of taking the burden of supply on their shoulders. I think regulation is a good way to ensure that the private sector are doing their jobs efficiently. And I think, as Sarah mentioned, I mean, these are the issues we have today are not a one-off. I mean, we do have a crisis and difficulties every few years from different sources. I think the existing crisis is still ongoing. I mean, it's far from over. And I think, as they say, never waste a good crisis. In this case, to improve efficiencies and to make reforms that maybe have not been needed for many years. I think now is a golden opportunity, I would say, sort of to pull our sleeves and all stakeholders to work together to make sure there's more resilience for the food supply chains in the East and South Mediterranean.
Thank you very much, Tarek. Thank you very much, Ali. Thank you very much, Sarah. I think that we take this idea. It's better to to look for a solution than to react to crisis. We also take your social concern. It's the moment to act, and it's the moment to look for solutions. And while we close this session here, it's the last session of the first day of this edition of Meta Week. We will meet you with all online speakers and attending people here tomorrow. Tomorrow we will have the second session, so we will wait for you here. And thank you very much for being with us. Thank you. Good night.
Merci.